What most of us will ever know or see of wild animals in their natural habitat, we owe to the skill and effort of the professional wildlife photographer. It seems simple, a little luck and the click of a shutter, but it's an occupation I discovered far more demanding, dangerous, and frustrating than I'd ever imagined before arriving in Africa to try my hand at it. My name is George Plimpton, and my particular device as a reporter is to train with top professionals and work towards the ultimate challenge in their field of endeavor. For example, I recently quarterbacked very briefly for the Baltimore Colts against the Detroit Lions. In the Clyde Beatty Circus, I was trying to master the trapeze. While in the movies, it was playing a bad guy with conviction. Now I find myself on Marsabit Mountain in northern Kenya on assignment for Life magazine. For 2 weeks I've been trying to find and take a really good photograph of what is possibly the largest land creature on Earth. A single legendary elephant who lives around here somewhere, who is called Ahmed.
Plimpton, Adventure in Africa, is brought to you by
I live in New York City, which is famous for its many disadvantages. But at least if you have a pet idea, something you'd really like to do, there are places that you can go to try it out on people. In this case, the Time Life Building.
George, that sounds marvelous.
The point of the story would be to try to get an action photograph of what is essentially, at least by all measurements, the largest land mammal there is. Of course, a whale. Life magazine had never done a picture story on Ahmed, the elusive giant elephant of Kenya, and I put my case before Ralph Graves, the managing editor, in the hope he'd let me have a try at it for them. As a really great elephant, so he is a legendary beast.
That sounds great, George, if you can get him. By the way, have you had any experience photographing wildlife before?
I won't be glad you brought that up, Ralph, because the fact of the matter is I haven't, and I'm going to need some help.
Now, I'm focused on that egret.
Stan Wayman was the first of life's top wildlife photographers to give me advice.
The egret's moving right into my focus area now.
Stan, I seem to be having some trouble here. It's absolutely pitch black.
Let me check. Oh, little problem with the lens cap there.
Oh.
Well, that happens to all of us. Don't worry about that.
At a bird sanctuary on Long Island, I tried to master the use of the telephoto lens. And there, of course, the basic challenge is to find through the viewer what you're trying to take a picture of. Well, now, when you take a picture, do you sort of see in your mind's eye what you want before you take it?
You wouldn't believe it, but I get a little tingle in my index finger right when I hit the shutter.
It's not a visual thing, though.
Oh, it's visual. I think the visual transmits itself to my finger, and it's like you get a chill in your spine.
When you know the picture's right.
Yeah.
For the education of my own index finger, John Dominus, another life photographer, took me out for a lesson or so in taking action pictures.
Now, this is good light, you know, for animals or any kind of action, any kind of picture, really. I like side light or backlight. Mm-hmm. And you need that extra drama in the pictures because people have seen pictures of elephants before. But I must say you need a lot of luck, too. And a good example of that is when I was doing a story on the whales, humpback whales in Bermuda. I was supposed to get a picture of the whale jumping out of the water. And I rigged up a very complicated thing with 3 motorized cameras so that if a whale jumped in any place, I would get a shot. Well, we spent 6 weeks on that, and one day I was just standing around making a few snapshots of the crew of the boat with a wide-angle lens, And suddenly I heard this huge noise and turned, and there was a whale just standing right in the air. And I just turned and made one exposure. And that's the only picture we ever got of the whale out of the water.
How does Ahmed live? What does he do? I want to feel the mood of his life, even though it takes a couple of days to show one day. And the amount of suffering that you're going to go through.
For some final instructions, Pat Hunt, the nature editor of Life, took me up to the nearest facsimile of the African bush, the Bronx Zoo, and she was tough. She made it clear she'd only accept first-rate pictures of Ahmed, no matter how difficult the assignment.
I know that, and I do appreciate it, but I don't care a darn when I'm looking for pictures on my desk.
But then she mentioned a possibility.
See if you could get a shot that was really extraordinary, we could make a cover, and boy, would I fight for that if we could get it.
Hooray, hooray.
But it's got to be extraordinary.
Well, Pat, I'll do my best. So in the Bronx Zoo one day, with visions of a possible life cover dancing in the mind, which is perhaps the ultimate fulfillment for the wildlife photographer, it was from there to Africa to see what I could do about realizing that possibility. When I arrived in Nairobi, Kenya, I knew that the first step a professional photographer must take before jumping into a difficult assignment is to research the story's subject. I was put in contact with an elephant expert who was waiting for me at the Norfolk Hotel, a famous rendezvous place for people going into the bush. Simon Trevor, a former warden and now a wildlife filmmaker, Simon Trevor would be my guide for the first few weeks.
Care for some tea?
I'd love some, thank you. Before going for Ahmed, Simon felt we should first train on somewhat lesser elephants.
Quite a lot. By watching them very carefully and being able to explain to you what they're doing, I'm sure you'll pick up a lot of signs and, that they give, warnings, and you can interpret what they're going to do.
One more stop was in order before leaving Nairobi.
Hunting, yeah, more like bush.
I had a safari outfit with me, but I thought I'd get an extra pair of long trousers just to be on the safe side. I had to look at a variety of things when really all I still needed were those long trousers.
Take your choice, George.
Peter, can you get me size 6 long sleeve safari jacket and
just some
size
long
36
trousers.
by 42, one pair jungle boot size
Simon,
6.
tell him, I
Plus
just
that
want
I
some
want
long
some shorts,
pants.
blue, green, khaki.
You're not going to sell me those short pants. Are the long ones coming along pretty soon?
Oh yes, you can put it later.
Oh, yeah, that's quite an improvement there, isn't it? I think, no?
You can adjust it from here.
Yes, I can see that it... yeah. Comes down awful
So it
far.
will shrink a little bit, so it will be a proper
It'll
size.
shrink.
It shrinks one size.
It'll shrink when it gets wet.
Are these pants going to shrink?
Not much, a little bit.
Well, I hope you're going to wrap up some long ones, because I really do want some long ones long.
But you want this short one, too.
Well,
One long and one short.
Well, just as long as there's some long ones in there. So with 5 pairs of short trousers in my kit, Simon and I traveled south to Lake Manyara in Tanzania, a small and compact game park on the shores of a soda lake, where the wildlife is so thick that to be there is almost like stepping into a Rousseau painting.
I thought lions couldn't climb trees.
The area is famous for its tree-climbing lions, a rare habit for them, and one theory is that they climb to get out from underfoot of the elephants. I'd imagine that my first African photo would be of some beast on the rampage, not a lion so full of his meal that it was only when he stirred that I was assured he wasn't a stuffed animal.
There's a fish eagle. He's going to land. No, you got to get a bigger one than that, George.
Yeah. I'll try the big one here.
Well, I doubt if that'll even do that. You need the very
really
big
big
one. No, get the really big one.
You mean the really massive one?
Yeah.
I haven't tried that one yet.
Well, for
smoke,
birds.
look at the thing.
For birds, you always need something like that. Take the lens cap off.
Monster.
Lens cap. That's it. Okay. Now hold it steady.
My God, I feel it's going to recoil here. It's so
Push
big.
Quickly.
Oh, can't find him.
Steady.
Hope he just went. Well, I got one.
Anyhow, you got one. You need a bit of practice with the big one.
It was all right to practice on fish eagles and lions, but it was elephant, finally, we were concerned with in getting ready to photograph Ahmed. And Manyara is famous for the number of its herds. From the safety of the vehicle, we could observe them close too. There were two things that struck me. First, what a unique and extraordinary device that elongated nose is, capable of so much, even of such a delicate operation as clearing the mud out of an eye. And then second, I was always surprised and relieved at how placid these elephants seemed, despite our proximity. But then Simon showed me what happens when elephants see the human silhouette.
Normally they react a lot more than that, but
Which one do you suppose of this group is the matriarch?
well, I should say it's the one on the left there, which at the moment I can see is the tallest elephant. Now, elephants grow throughout their entire lives. They never stop growing. So therefore, the matriarch is normally the largest because she's the oldest.
Oh, I see. Well, is there a sort of pecking order? For example, is her position of authority challenged by any other
No,
elephant?
not challenged. No, in elephant society, you don't have this challenging of one elephant by another. Like you do in lions, for instance. The male is resident in the pride until such time as he's pushed out by a stronger member. Elephant bulls leave the herd when they're around 15 years old. They're chased out by the matriarchs, and they go off alone.
Presumably Ahmed was driven away by some such matriarch?
Yes, definitely. But that was quite a long time ago, probably 40 years ago or so.
40 years?
Yeah.
Next in my preparation for Ahmed came getting out of the vehicle and working with elephants on foot. We did it by degrees. First of all, Simon, who always seemed to be able to predict the direction in which the elephant would move,
George, they're coming close.
got me up into an acacia tree immediately in the path of an advancing herd. There was one statistic that kept humming in my mind as I strained to reach a safe pitch, that the average elephant is about 9 feet tall, and with his trunk he can reach up to about 15. In Manyara, he's been known to knock those tree-climbing lions off their branches.
Catch.
The herd came on. They move all that tonnage across the ground with astonishing silence, so that one understands the common observation about them, that elephants on the move seem to melt through the forest. It was hard to believe they wouldn't spot me, but elephants usually look at a point 15 degrees in front of them and very rarely up. From above, I could look down and see their long eyelashes, quite demure. But never to my relief did they raise their heads so the eye itself discovered me. Simon got me down and we hurried after the herd, this time to get into position and wait on foot for them to pass through.
First thing to do is to check the wind, George. You must always stay downwind of the elephant, you see. It's blowing across here now, so we're okay at the moment.
When the wind is right, you can get very close to elephant because their eyesight is so poor.
The wind's okay, the wind is...
Some say that elephants can't see clearly much beyond 15 feet, though it's not a figure that bears testing. But by all odds, they can hear superbly. He was close, about 18 feet away, and not only my index finger, but the rest of me was tingling. My foot snapped a branch. It was his decision what to do next, and luckily, it was to back off.
That would have been it.
If it scented us, he would have probably charged in here or run away. But that's quite close.
Yeah, I'll say it was.
Okay. But remember where you're going to put your feet, boy. Okay, let's get on with it.
So from then on, with self-preservation very much in mind, I made a point of putting my feet exactly where Simon put his. Hippopotamus were reported in this pond, but instead we found something else.
Python. Quite a big one, too. George,
I didn't know what Simon was up to, but I'd rather hoped we'd just kept on going. After all, it was elephant we were supposed to be after, a difficult enough job as it was, and not one to be compounded by struggling with large snakes.
George, it's a big one. Beauty. Watch out. See it, Ken?
Yep. Pythons aren't poisonous, but they do bite like an angry dog, and I don't know, I just have a thing about
Try
them.
and drag it that way.
What am I going to do once I get him up here?
Come on. Get a good grip.
Pull. More. What are we going to do once we get it up here?
You get a great picture.
Yeah. Okay. Jesus, it's a big one.
It's enormous. He's huge.
Oh, we get... When you pull him up, when you get the head over the top,
Yeah.
you just have to watch out of your strike.
Right.
Pull. Up. Good. He's going to strike. Take a picture.
Simon, what's the f-stop?
Try and get a shot of the mouth open.
I can't focus, Simon.
Let him go in the water.
Simon, I missed it.
Never a dull moment, huh?
What do you think he was, about 14, 15 feet?
Something in that region, yeah. I didn't have much...
Carried away by the excitement, I never took a photo. And that made me really worry about how I'd react confronting the great elephant to the north. Of course, it would be a mistake to think of the African elephant as an animal who, because of his size and power, can live out his life in tranquility. There are between 20 and 25,000 elephant in Kenya, and in all other areas other than the game parks and reserves, it is legal to shoot them. Native Africans, many of them with poison bows and arrows, and others with antique weapons, depend upon the elephant as a source of supply to their tribes. A dead elephant is an enormous economic property, as much as 5 or 6 tons worth. And he provides food, of course. His hide is valuable, and he carries in his head the elongated teeth which have built empires, his ivory tusks. At the turn of the century in East Africa, when there was a tremendous demand for ivory, over 70,000 elephants annually were killed for their tusks. In these times, about 3,000 elephants a year are killed in East Africa. Many for sustenance, others cropped to keep the elephant population down, others by poachers, and still others by sportsmen. And invariably, all this ivory ends up in the so-called ivory room in Mombasa. Most of it goes from here to Hong Kong, often to be carved into tiny ivory elephants, which then come back to Kenya for sale in the Nairobi shops. So that one is left with the irony of an elephant sent thousands of miles at his death, only to be sent back as a 6-ounce replica of himself.
Yeah, quite interesting.
I asked the manager of the ivory room about the value of Ahmed's great tusks, which have been estimated at being 13 feet long and to weigh 200 pounds apiece.
If it's been sold to a museum, it could get about 15,000 pounds for it.
Which would be $45,000, wouldn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Well, it's a pretty melancholy thought, isn't it, to think of him ending up in here. If anyone could appreciate Ahmed's enormous tusks, it would be the trophy hunter. So I went up the coast to the old ivory port of Lamu to see a professional big game hunter, Bunny Allen. Bunny is perhaps an incongruous name for one whose specialty is the taking of elephants, hundreds over a 30-year career in the bush. He is retired now in Lamu, but there are still huge elephants in the swamps inland, and occasionally Bunny Allen goes in there to get himself one. Can you talk easily about the pleasure of the hunt, the thrill of the kill?
Well, I love a hunt, and I always tell all my friends and enemies that it's inherent in man to hunt.
Is it the stalk or the kill that's more exciting?
Stalk, chiefly, and executing a good shot. And I will say this, that the most exciting thing on God's earth is to bring down a charging elephant when he's getting pretty close to you with a perfectly executed brain shot.
Yeah.
That's a tremendous thrill. Afterwards, you may feel, well, why have I done this? There's that thing, so especially as you get older.
Yeah.
You know, once shot a lot of elephants, and you think, well, this will be the last one.
Yeah.
You know, there's something special about elephant hunting because of those wonderful teeth in its head that do cost so many elephants their lives, in fact.
Ivory gives you a very sensual pleasure, does it, to touch and to look at?
It's wonderful stuff to caress.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean, anyone, if they shoot a good tusker, they'll go up and they'll just stroke that ivory. It's a wonderful, it's something very special that no other animal has, of course.
Mm.
And that is the great thrill and the great excitement of elephant hunting.
What if Ahmed wandered into a hunting block? Would you take a pot shot at him?
Well, you know, the temptation would be tremendous. I'd love to. But I really think, at my age and the experience I've had, I think I'd be pretty decent about Ahmed. If I knew it was Ahmed, I wouldn't shoot him, but I'd love to find his big brother somewhere. I really would. And then he'd be mine.
On the other side of the coin is David Sheldrick, the warden of Savo Park East, who is dedicated to the conservation of elephant. He is one of the toughest wardens in Africa, a terror to poachers, many of whom he has converted and who now work for him in his superbly disciplined Ranger Corps. He is a man so opposed to unnecessary killing that one legend is that he inspects the grills of cars in his park for traces of dead birds. He will severely reprimand a driver for killing them. David, you used to hunt elephant, didn't you, in your early years?
Yes. Yes, I was, just after the war, I was a professional hunter for a short time before the parks were proclaimed.
What made you change your mind about killing elephant and trying now to protect them?
Well, it all seemed rather futile somehow, and they're such magnificent creatures.
If there is a gentle side to David Sheldrick, it is of course when he is with animals, especially the orphans he finds and raises whose parents have been killed by poachers or by the droughts that plague the area. Sheldrick and his wife look out for them at their Savo headquarters, and when the elephant or the rhino is capable of getting along on his own, he is released to the wild. The animals leave with regret, and often they come back to the Sheldricks, as if to keep in touch. Now let's see, he's testing the wind there, is he?
Yes, he smells those elephants, those wild elephants under the trees. And sometimes under favorable conditions, they can pick up scent of a person a mile away.
A mile away?
Yes.
Extraordinary sight.
No, you don't want to take chances. There have been plenty of people killed by them, and particularly the wild ones.
Ahmed is not going to stand like that, is he?
Oh, no. Yes.
His elephants at his heels, like Irish setters, Sheldrick symbolizes man and elephant living in accord. He is hopeful about their future, especially if we do not tamper with their life patterns. If we're careful, he feels, there will always be an Ahmed for us to see, and for our children, and for our grandchildren.
Well, not so much advice, George. There's certain things that I would like you to do.
On the way north to Marsabit, I stopped in to see Peter Jenkins and his family. He is the warden of the Meru Reserve, and his official responsibility also includes the Marsabit area and its monstrous elephant. In fact, he is one of the great experts on Ahmed, having observed him firsthand for a number of years.
There may be other elephants that we don't know of that are bigger, but he's certainly the biggest known elephant alive. And I think a lot of it is hereditary. And of course, Ahmed has never been subjected to trophy hunting of any sort. You see, Marsabit was made a game reserve about 1912, the whole of that Marsabit area.
Mm-hmm.
So those elephants up there have never been shot for trophies. And they've been able to live their full and natural lifespan, which is about 60, 65 in the case of an elephant.
What are my chances of finding Ahmed, do you think?
Well, he's a wild animal, you know, and you can't predict wild animals at all. I would say at this time of the year, chances are fairly good. But there's no guarantee to it, of course. When you see him, you won't be able to believe that there's such a big elephant exists. You know, he makes other elephants, even sort of 120-pounders who he's often with, look like nothing.
So somewhere out there, in the swirling mists of Marsabit, the confrontation so distant when it was planned months before was now close at hand. My indoctrination was now over, and I was off on my own to find Ahmed. The last part of the 400 miles north was through the Shalby Desert, much of it dry and burnt like pottery, but always an occasional glimpse of game to whet the appetite of the would-be wildlife photographer. Then on the horizon I saw the great Mossabit Mountain, where I'd spend as much time working out of a base camp as was necessary to find Ahmed. My first encounter with an animal on the mountains was something of a surprise.
Is he all right? Yes, he's fine. He just loves riding Americas, that's all.
I'll say he does. I bet he drives him, too.
No, don't worry about that. He's not licensed.
George Plimpton.
Gordon Morrison, pleased to meet you.
Gordon Morrison was in charge of the small, semi-permanent camp, which was situated on the edge of the Mossabit Forest, with a few tents available for people who wanted to visit the area. Many of them, like myself, came with the specific intent of trying to spot the big elephant.
I'll send you some hot water down. And also a hot water bottle tonight.
A hot water bottle?
Yeah.
It gets that cold? It certainly did get that cold. The next morning was typical. A brisk north wind carrying with it a thick mist that shrouded the mountains. It took a strong act of will not only to get out of bed in the morning, but to get through the ablutions of the day. The water came down hot from the kitchen tent, but it didn't stay that way long. The fact is that I don't recall that I ever took any more early morning showers. But then that first morning was special. I was going to be introduced to someone quite indispensable, without whom the search for Ahmed would be hopeless.
Looks like Walker coming now. Yes, there he is. Yeah.
You know, Gordon, what worries me is a little bit is communication. My Swahili is limited to about 6 words, and then in moments of stress, it seems to go into Italian, sort of a strange, violent Italian.
Oh, I wouldn't worry too much, actually, George, for the sign language.
I'll remember that.
All right, here's Walker.
Corporal Wako. He knows more about Ahmed than anyone in Africa. A year ago, Ahmed was decreed a living national monument by President Kenyatta, and Corporal Wako was assigned to try to keep an eye on him, to protect him from poachers and others who might have designs on the great elephant.
Does he think we have a chance of finding Ahmed?
He thinks you'll be able to find him in this mist.
Good. Has he got some special instructions for me?
Sasa wewe kumenene wewe nataka sema na bwana au
Bana, mimi naona yeye mzee sana, sijui afanye kama yeye naweza, na tena napanda kila wakati. Na
what he'd like you to do is stick pretty close to him, and he said it's pretty rough in the forest there. You know, you're going through gullies and uphill and down there and all that. He said he's a bit worried whether you can keep up with him. He said you look a bit on the old side.
Where does he want to go? Look for him.
Where nataka kwenda tafuta Ahmed Sangapi?
Sasa hivi.
You should right away.
Right away?
Yeah, right away.
No, we're off.
Much of Mossabit, which is about 40 square miles, is covered by thick forest, a considerable space for Ahmed to roam in. There was a lot else in there, too, it turned out. I couldn't see what had made the crash. Nyati, Wako had said, which was something of a blow to my sense of well-being, since according to my trusty Swahili dictionary, Nyati translates to mean Cape Buffalo. Always in that thick bush and mist, there was the possibility of Ahmed being 10 feet away, unseen, along with his attendant bulls, the dangerous sentry elephants that guarded him. One tried very hard to be stealthy. The door handle has come off. We stopped for a rest at the Gofbongola crater, a good time to brush up on Swahili. The only available Swahili grammar was written for British settlers in 1936, so that the so-called phrases of common usage have an odd, quaint quality. A hippopotamus has destroyed our hut. Kiboko amaharibu kibanda yetu.
Kibanda? Hiyo mimi wanajua kwanza.
The latrine is full of fleas. Shu, inaja ya kiroboto.
Oh, dudu.
Uh-huh. That man is a witch doctor. See the frog in his bucket. Who you imachawi? Ona chura katika kifoko yake.
Ya ile kitu ya maji. Ya. Maji. Kwa maji. Ile. Ndio.
Wako, Sisi kwenda kati musitoni to look for Ahmed.
Kwa msitoni kutafuta Ahmed.
Ahmed.
Mzuri.
Mzuri?
Ndio.
It turned out the language difficulty was not confined just to the two of us. In the Marsabit area, there are 4 separate and distinctive languages spoken. Later that day, we ran across some herds of cattle being tended by Rendili tribesmen. But Wako comes from a different tribe, and trying to find out if possibly these people had seen Ahmed, he had to use sign language in talking to them, outlining an elephant's tusks. It was such a complete lack of communication that I could just as well have asked them myself. And yet in a valley across the hills, just a few miles away, and practicing exactly the same kind of nomadic cattle-herding culture, were Wako's people, the Boran. The Boran wells were one of the great discoveries of Marsabit for me. Deep water holes from which the water was delivered by a human bucket brigade, passed up from hand to hand into the long troughs for the cattle. A chief called a fundi oversees everything, and a call by one of his lieutenants signals a herdsman waiting in the surrounding hills to send down his cattle. They say the fundi knows every head of cattle in the area by sight. Over 5,000 water at the wells, and they are kept coming and going in their proper order. Years ago, the authorities tried to put a pump in for the Boran, but the ritual of the well, the songs which are chanted tributes to their cattle, all of this tradition provided such pleasures that the Boran dismantled the pump and threw it away. Sometimes the leader speeds up the tempo of the song, like the shifting of gears, to inspire the weary to that tremendous muscular expenditure, hour after hour. Such a contrast between their effort and the peaceful lines of cattle muzzles in the water. The days were long and eventful, but it was always a relief to get back to the sanctuary of base camp before nightfall. No one in Africa likes to be out in the bush after the sun goes down. What is it like out there at night?
Bwana Lisa, saa ile wewe unakaa huku postoni usiku, ni namna gani?
Ndovu, simba, kifaru, wakati mwingine fanya na wakati mwingine nugu nafanya na wakati mwingine ndovu nafanya napiga kelele. Hiyo yote sinasikia.
I got most of that from the sound. Does he like it out there at night?
Wewe pende huku usiku?
Hapana penda sana lakini historia kasi mimi.
Natetemeka.
Natetemeka.
Fighting, they shakes.
See why. Lake Paradise is a crater lake high on the mountain, and it's a place where the elephant come down to bathe in water, Ahmed among them. Waka hoped to pick up his tracks. There were plenty of signs of elephant around, including a rock rubbed smooth by generations of elephants relieving an itch.
Ndovu, mchezo na naye. Tembo, maridadi yake.
But there was no sign of Ahmed that Waka could find, so he went back into the forest. Then at a forest spring, Wako finally spotted his tracks. A couple of hours ahead of us, he said. The big elephant had stopped to pull down a tree and eat its leaves. We were getting close. Where Ahmed had stopped to drink, the water was still muddy. Now he was just in front of us. And then Wako pointed through the bushes, and I had my first glimpse of Ahmed, a great rain-washed tusk shining through the leaves. But off to the left was one of Ahmed's dangerous sentry bulls. The wind was right, and we were able to get a bit closer, but the photographs, a mass of shrubbery, I suspected, with perhaps a gleam of ivory, a patch or so of elephant hide. I realized with a sense of despair that although we'd finally tracked Ahmed down, to get a great picture, we'd have to find him in the open. We had lost Ahmed's trail for a few days, but the search through the Marsabit area for his tracks often turned up sights that made the daily disappointment of not finding the great elephant a little easier to take. One day, Corporal Wako brought me to some caves, just high enough to stand in, that seemed naturally formed.
Nini, hii bali kifaru nakula chuma.
Kifaru, rhinoceros. Biki kifaru kula hii, yote hii.
The caves were literally eaten out of the side of a hill by rhino. It's the salt they're after, and they've chomped away at the hill like mice eating themselves into a vast cheese. But it was always Ahmed, of course, who was chiefly on our minds, to the point that as time went on and we still hadn't found his tracks, there was a sort of quality of desperation about our search, at least on my own part. We saw a young bull one afternoon, which I jumped to the conclusion was one of Ahmed's sentries, an askari. And indeed, off to one side, in a thick bush, we could just pick out the form of a big elephant. Wako was skeptical, but it was a possibility that had to be checked out. And we got downwind and began to move up on them. I kept persuading myself that it was Ahmed, that in a moment I would see him in the open with his great tusks, so enormous that one legend has it that going up a hill he walks backwards to keep the tusks from snagging on the ground. The elephant kept to his bush, typical of Ahmed's behavior. Wako was going to try to flush him out into the open by rousing him with the grunting cough of a lion. And out he came. A rank imposter. But at least it had been a good practice run. Corporal Wako was delayed the next morning. Word came from his chief ranger that he'd been detained by an emergency. And Gordon Morrison and I drove down there, 5 or 6 miles away, to meet him.
I reckon about 50 meters from where we are now.
Quite a crowd of rangers were peering into the bushes off the road. In there, apparently, was a lion, a crippled lion that had made an unsuccessful rush at a villager walking along the road that morning.
Yeah.
This fella here.
Karibu kula mimi. Karibu kula mimi. Karibu kukamata huyu. Karibu kukamata. Kushuka kwa gari namna hii. Yanasema.
A huge lion, he had said, and the rangers set off in their trucks to destroy him. It was a pathetic sight. Far from being a huge lion, what the rangers had destroyed was a near skeleton, a bag of bones. His leg broken by a poacher's trap, unable to catch his usual game, he had been reduced to eating porcupine.
This porcupine is squares.
You can see how thin he is.
Yeah, he's very thin.
Almost invariably in Africa, one runs across the depredations caused by poachers and their traps. Poaching is certainly the chief concern of the park rangers.
Are you worried about Ahmed being poached?
Yes. I've heard of many things from my bosses that some people want to come and kill Ahmed just for prestige.
Oh, yes.
They want to go and say, I killed the biggest elephant in Africa or something. For one thing, he has very big tusks, and that would get him a lot of money. Secondly, he will say, because they are not our friends, I should say, they don't like us because we stop them from poaching. So they would like to kill that animal which we know we are boasting of all the time.
Yeah.
Because somebody might come in here, shoot Ahmed, and go through Ethiopia, and never get him at all.
Zama. Dudu mzuri.
Ndio.
Gani Dudu?
Hii dudu ngine ya natembea ndani ya forest.
Ah.
Ndio.
In English, butterfly.
Ndio.
Butterfly.
Ndio. Butterfly.
Ah.
Ndio.
Find us Ahmed now. Go ahead. Find us Ahmed. Go on. Ah, there he goes.
We kept to the high ridges, knowing that our only hope of a good photograph would be to find Ahmed in the open. And then early on the afternoon of that day, Wako borrowed my field glasses. 2 miles away, across a valley in a clearing just at the edge of the forest, he spotted the great elephant. And with that sight, after having searched for so long, came a great rush of excitement for the both of us. But as we moved up close, quite typically, we spotted the great elephant meandering slowly off into the forest. Once again, it was a question of waiting and hoping he'd eat his way out of the bush and into the open. The sun was quite high when we sat down, but it began to sink towards the red sandhills of the Shalby Desert. Well, that's what my photographer tutors had said, that so much depended on patience. As I mumbled to myself, come on, Ahmed, get out of there, show yourself. And of course there were the flies that wouldn't let me alone, and there were the tick bites to scratch at. And then Wako and I spent a profound half hour contemplating a grasshopper. But always in the back of the mind, as the afternoon wore on, was the nagging thought that luck was the greatest ingredient, and that we lacked it. But finally it changed. The great elephant was on the move. the legendary Ahmed began to emerge. Wako was nervous about our position. Off to one side was one of Ahmed's sentry bulls, a big one, and acting suspicious. So we kept on the move, Wako trying to predict where Ahmed would come out into the open, where he might offer himself for a good photograph. Sometimes everything seemed right, but then the wind would shift, and Corporal Wako would motion me to stop taking pictures for the moment and follow him into a new position. We'd get there with a wary eye out for the sentry, and Ahmed would be half in, half out of a bush, waving his great lyre-shaped tusks at us. Sometimes the light was flat, and even though I could see Ahmed clearly, I knew the pictures would be unsatisfactory. In fact, after a while, I found it took an effort to raise the camera, that I was impatient, even frustrated, having to look at the great elephant through an apparatus. And of course, all the niggling worries. Were the settings right? Was the film loaded correctly? Was there any film in the camera at all? The equipment weighed me down and seemed cumbersome and in the way. It almost seemed preferable simply to use one's own eyes, stare at him, to fix him indelibly in the mind so that he would always be available for recall without having to refer to a photograph. But of course I clicked away nonetheless with varied exposures and settings and with every lens I had in my knapsack. The sun was going down and we only had time to get into position for a few more attempts at photographing him. There were details about Ahmed that began to stand out, which I hoped I was capturing on film. His torn ears, the sunken temples that showed his 60 years, a row of warts on his back. And then I watched what I knew I could never really capture in my still photographs, how in motion his strange, stumbling gait bore such witness to his antiquity. As the sunlight faded, the sentry bulls began stirring, and Wako kept urging me back. I continued to take pictures as we left Ahmed, still trying for that life cover. I remember looking back at him for the last time and thinking of him as a spectacle of such tragic dignity that I felt oddly the intruder for having spied on him.
That is a little sharper, isn't it?
Yeah, and the light's better, too.
I think that might make a good lead-off picture for the lead spread.
Well, that was good news, that of the hundreds of pictures I'd taken of Ahmed, at least some of them were technically proficient enough to illustrate an article I'd write for the magazine. As to whether one of them was good enough to achieve the stature that all photographers hope so desperately for, well, finally I just couldn't resist asking.
Would any of these work as a cover? I mean, some of these vertical fellows up here?
You know, George, you're just like a professional photographer, after all. Well, let's at least try one.
Try one.
Which one do you like?
Well, yeah, number, what is that?
That's number 9.
Oh, there it comes.
We do use vertical shots for covers, but every vertical shot doesn't make a cover.
Well, I don't see anything wrong with that at all.
I didn't think you would. It's a perfectly good picture of an elephant, and he's a great big animal. But there's no snap to it, no action. I mean, he's just standing there.
It's wonderful, but it just doesn't have that fire in it.
Yes, I suppose so. I'd like to defend him, but because it seems pretty good to me, I must say. Look at that thing, life, a great big elephant.
Well, we'll print one for you anyway, just so that you can show it to people.
I'll treasure it.
Okay.